morning, and thank you all for being here. I want to share 3 quotes that I think are incredibly relevant to what we've heard so far today. If men are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter, which may involve the most serious and alarming consequences that can invite the consideration of mankind, reason is of no use to us. The freedom of speech may be taken away, and dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep, to the slaughter. That's the first president of the United States, George Washington. Let's flash forward almost 200 years. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of the press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for right. That's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Finally, no government should be without critics. If its intentions are good, then it has nothing to fear from criticism. That's Thomas Jefferson, who's considered to be the father of free speech. He was serving abroad as the ambassador to France when the Constitution was written and ratified. But he used his considerable influence to argue for the inclusion of a Bill of Rights. He was responsible for writing the First Amendment to the new Constitution, which reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." What we're here to talk about today is a grave violation of the United States Constitution. Our Republican state government continues to attack vulnerable populations, to deflect criticism and fire up its base. Today, and almost every day, school kids and their rights are under attack. I'm surrounded by students who are more than ready to tell you what they think of this bill, but let me first tell you this. When we take more power away from expert stakeholders, and I'm talking about parents, I'm talking about teachers, I'm talking about principals, and hand it over to partisan Department of Education bureaucrats in Little Rock, who are we serving? Because it's not our local schools, it's not our teachers, and it's certainly not our students. So let's hear from some of them. First, I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie Giblin, the Communications Director for UALR's Student Government.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Giblin. I'm a student at UA Little Rock, formerly a student at Watson Chapel High School, and I am very opposed to the Arkansas Access Act because it's simply bad for our schools and our students. I'm proud to read a portion of the letter from numerous officers and leaders at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock have signed opposing Arkansas Access. As officers and senators of the UA Little Rock Student Government Association, we aim to represent a politically diverse student body whose members reserve their constitutional rights to advocate for whichever political cause in which they believe. We find issue in the Access Bill's proposed restrictions on the rights of students engaging in civil society, as it is protected by the First Amendment, which includes the freedoms of speech, assembly, and seeking redress from one's government. At great risk to the funding of our student government, students came together to oppose this legislation. This is an unprecedented move for student government, and if legislators can't respect our opposition and amend the many bad parts of this bill, they are making it clear. They want to silence us. They don't support our First Amendment rights to speak out. They oppose free speech. And they don't think we'll hold them accountable, and that's where they're wrong. I'll pass it over to Roan Kuda, a Little Rock Central High School student and progressive organizer.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Roan Kuda, and I'm an organizer in Students Against the Access Act Coalition. I was also a volunteer of the CAPES Initiative and a state petitioner during the last election season. This is not the first time the Arkansas legislature has tried to silence us, but this time, we as students were ready to face opposition. That is why more than 50 people showed up today at the Arkansas State Capitol to voice their opposition to this bill, and the repeated attacks on public education from the Sanders administration and the General Assembly. Little Rock Central High is one of the most famous schools in the country. We have a long, remarkable history of political activism, and that is why students understand the importance of participating in a walkout whenever LEARNS was passed and the voucher scam was introduced to our state. That is why so many students understood the importance of speaking up whenever the abortion amendment was thrown off the ballot for a petty technicality, based in a supreme opposition to the democratic cries of our state. That's exactly why so many people showed up today to face opposition and voice their concerns against the Access Act. By attempting to silence Arkansans and cut us out of our own education system, they are only giving us more energy and power to fight back. Let's get this straight. Access only affects public school students. Private school and homeschool students can still go speak during committee meetings. Private schools are given a blanket check on vouchers, and our money is being extracted from the good, hard-working hands of the people in this state and funneled into the privately owned schools of billionaire corporate interests like the Walton family and Don Tyson. Students speaking out is good. We should want more students to speak up. When young people participate in the political process and feel engaged, that is a sign our education system is working as intended. I want to be clear now. I don't want to be speaking at this press conference about access right now. I'm proud of students for speaking up, but we should not be repeatedly forced to fight tooth and nail against the destruction of public education, against these obvious efforts to silence us and our voices. I would much rather be at school. I am only here because of the fight for our future. And I want to be clear, students will win this fight. And we will hold every legislator that has tried to silence us and cut the Arkansans out of our own education system accountable. The pendulum of history will always swing back in the direction of freedom, liberation, and justice. And the people of Arkansas will rule again. I'll hand it over to Zaid Kelly next. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. I'm Zaid Kelly. I'm a former SGA president at Arkansas State University BB. I'm an alumni of Cabot High School, and now I'm currently a senior at the University of Central Arkansas. Now, this bill truly is a solution in search of a problem. There are not students flooding the Capitol to speak against legislation. Walkouts are uncommon, protests even more so. The only reason I'm here and why the students behind me are here is because our right to speak out and public education in Arkansas is at risk. As someone who has organized students in student governments, even those who are most politically engaged are hesitant to get involved. And I myself identify with that sentiment. I never wanted to get political. I wanted to serve the state and do something good. And I never anticipated getting involved with partisan politics. But the never-ending attacks on our public schools, our teachers, and students has forced me into taking action. There are so many provisions to oppose in access. Focusing on training and job opportunities is fine. But students need to know how to read, how to write, and how our government works. Civic education should be bolstered in Arkansas. We rank 51st in voter turnout. And job training is good, but our literacy rates and test scores are declining. Focusing less on academics will be a disaster for our workforce overall. And I know this firsthand from serving the student body at ASUBB. Students who are behind academically shouldn't be shoved into workforce training. Schools have to ensure that students understand the government, can read, and can do basic math so that they can exist in the workforce. I'm proud to be speaking at this event today because I've seen firsthand that Democrats are fighting for me to receive the best and most affordable education possible. Democrats are supporting my right to speak out and even platforming me at this press conference right now. And if Republicans will try to silence me, a lifelong Arkansan who graduated from Cabot High School, the former president of the student government at ASUBB, trust me, they will come for your First Amendment rights too. And I hope you will stand by me now as I stood for you then. And I'm going to finish my remarks with a quote from one of my political heroes, Bobby Kennedy Sr. Each time one stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope. and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Thank you, and I'm going to pass it to Daisy Oronobe. I definitely messed that up. But...
Thank you. I'm Daisy Oronobe. I'm a student at Philander Smith University. I spoke earlier this session about Senate Bill 3, which, similar to Arkansas Access, attacks diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all in institutions that receive state funding. I will restate what I said about Senate Bill 3. This bill contends that opportunities should be awarded purely on qualifications with no consideration for race, gender, or background. That sounds fair in theory. But there's a fundamental problem with that argument. Merit only works as a fair measure when the playing field is already level, and it isn't. Arkansas Access, like Senate Bill 3, will not eliminate discrimination. Instead, it will dismantle policies that were designed to ensure access to opportunity for those who have historically been denied it. As a student at an HBCU, the intention behind this bill is especially heinous, and it calls into question the future of these critical higher learning institutions that are specifically intended to serve Black students. Furthermore, the prohibition on students coming to voice their concerns at a legislative committee meeting, coming to speak for their futures and their classmates, is as authoritarian and as destructive as it gets. Arkansas students deserve better. Every single student, no matter their zip code or skin color, deserves access to a high-quality public education and the opportunity to go to college if they want to. Even more fundamental, they deserve their opportunity to voice their opinions to their legislators, and there should never be legislation specifically prohibiting them from doing so. It is extremely unclear how these provisions will affect Arkansas colleges. How does this affect student organizations, scholarships, and support centers for women? Can staff tell students to stop making racist comments? How does this affect hiring diverse liaisons for colleges? Diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are not a problem. They're good for Arkansas. I'm proud to stand in this student coalition today, and I'll now hand it over to the president of the Young Democrats of Arkansas, President Allison Brixey-Sweat.
Thank you, Daisy. I want to begin by thanking every single student, some up here, some out here, who came out today to testify, and thank you to Democratic Party of Arkansas Chair Grant Tennille for giving them this opportunity to speak to the media. This is what empowering young people looks like. It does not look like school vouchers. It does not look like prohibiting them from protesting or speaking out, and it certainly doesn't look like taking power away from expert education stakeholders that care deeply about the future of Arkansas's public education system. I want to tell you a personal story. My children, both of them, have disabilities. My son Bo qualified for a voucher under the Succeed Scholarship before we had the LEARNS Act. The GOP championed LEARNS after that as a beacon for families of students with disabilities. And we didn't need it. Families like mine already qualified for the services that we needed to take our children where we needed to take them to get what they needed to get an education. I want to challenge everyone in the state today to consider an alternative vision for public education. What if every single student in the state, no matter their ability, no matter their skin color, no matter their zip code, what if they had access to the highest quality public education in the country, no matter which corner of Arkansas they live in? I've served as a liaison and an advocate facilitating educational opportunities for families of children with disabilities to get the services that they need for their kids. And at times I have seen how public schools lack the funding and resources and training that they need in order to deliver and meet the needs of every student. And I'm here to tell you today that vouchers will not solve that problem. Programs like Access will not solve that problem, and in many ways it makes it worse. They will only ensure that fewer children get the high quality education that they deserve, and instead, only students with the support, knowledge, access to resources, and access to alternative education options will be served by LEARNS and by Access. And as for our rural state, that leaves the majority of Arkansas children, especially students with disabilities, in the dust. I want every single student in Arkansas to know that their voice matters. Their education should be a priority to legislators, and their voice should be a priority for listening for our legislators. But I'm sad to report that today, instead, the legislature is focused on giving public school funds to private schools, giving themselves more power, and making sure that you students never get the opportunity to tell them what you think about it. The students in Arkansas public schools 20 years from now will thank these students for speaking out, and I'm proud to stand alongside them. I'll hand it back over to Chair Greg Tennille.
All right, anybody have questions for me or anybody else?
Do you plan to challenge parts of access in court? if this was
Well,
to pass?
it's certainly something that we're looking at. We don't know yet. And I will say, for the benefit of some of our legislators, there are piece parts of this bill that we don't dislike, but it is so laden with problems like this that, and obviously we've got nobody to have a real conversation with, so we're stuck, and the courts may wind up being our only available opportunity. Again, I think, and certainly for students over the age of 8, there may be a constitutional issue here that's worth looking at.
Is the fact that this is organized by the DPA and make it seem like it's a partisan thing rather than what it began with?
Well, I think that there are people behind me who will say they were champing at the bit. I'm standing up here to give them a chance to talk to you, is why I'm here today. Because you often don't go looking for these people. But if I ask you to come stand here, you're going to show up, and they get to talk. And that was the goal. Look, and I maybe should have put a bigger spotlight on this earlier. I think some of what we're seeing here today is retaliation. I think it's retaliation against students for what we saw at Learns. And sooner or later, you got to cut them off because you don't want to listen to any more of it. We've got some committee chairs who've behaved in what can only be described as a shameful manner to Arkansas students. And I'm just here to say that's wrong. And who better to show up with than these folks?
So Keith Brooks, Jane English, is that who you are?
Sure, you said the names and I'll agree. I'll agree. Next. And nobody's asked
You
for a question.
mentioned that you agreed with parts of it. Can you talk about a little bit more about that? Which sections do you agree with?
I mean, there's some aspects. Look, if you go back and read in the Democrat Gazette the things that I have said about our need for more skills training across the board, I'm happy that we're beginning to look at some of those things through the lens that I have long preached that we should. Now, the difference is I don't want to pick and choose, and I don't think we should ever get in the business of picking and choosing. My old boss used to tell me, when I used to argue for picking and choosing, that his light bulb didn't go off until he was a senior in high school, and that if we had picked and chose, we wouldn't have had him as our governor. And he convinced me that's right. And so, I think that we've got to make every opportunity available to every kid, because I believe that there is no more important investment that we can make in Arkansas than in the education of our people. And I'm talking about cradle to grave.
If they amend a few parts of the bill that may not be aligned with you guys right now, is that something that you guys might consider?
I haven't seen a markup, so I don't know. Can't tell you. They're not gonna. I'll tell you that. They haven't responded to our hollering about anything else, and we certainly hollered about Learns. And now we're gonna live with it.